Everybody, it's now 7 o'clock and welcome to this evening's Licensing and Public Protection Committee being held today, Tuesday the 13th of December 2022. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and recorded for publication at a later date. May I ask members that in order to avoid any confusion, that if they wish a vote to be held on any items this evening, that they make me aware of this at the appropriate time. Could I also ask members if they wish to speak on any of the items, could they use their microphone and could they raise their hands so that I can identify who wishes to speak? Thank you. We now come to the agenda. Licensing. Apologies. Item number 1 is apologies. I've received one apologies, and that's from Councillor Ruth Wright, and Councillor Wendy Brocky is substituting for her this evening. As all members are here, I take it there's no more apologies. So item 2 is declarations of interest in relation to licensing matters. Do any members have any declarations of interest? No, no hands raised. We move to item 3. Minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes for the previous meeting can be found on pages 5 to 8 of your agenda. Can I ask members, are we content and we can take them as read? Yes, no problem with that. As there are no licensing subcommittee meetings since our last meeting, there are no minutes available for those. So I will move on to item 4, which is the first item of business for this evening, which is fees to be charged for the licensing of scrap metal dealers, gambling, sexual entertainment venue licensing 2023 to 24. The contents of this report can be found on pages 9 to 14 of your pack. I will now hand over to Matt, who will present his report on this matter this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. As Councillor Parker has said, this relates to the fees that the council charge in relation to various licensing regimes within the council, specifically the scrap metal dealers, gambling and sexual entertainment or sex establishment venues. The reason it's brought to this committee is the powers have been delegated by council down to the committee to decide the fees for these particular regimes where possible. And what the recommendation is for you today is to agree the fees that are within the report. As I said, decisions relating to these non-statutory fees have been delegated to yourselves. Just a sort of a short overview of each of the regimes. So the Gambling Act 2005 has some statutory fees, which obviously we can't amend, but there are those where they have a maximum range where the authority are allowed to set fees within that range. So some of those are included today. Sexual entertainment venues or sex establishment licenses. The council don't currently have any. However, it is completely non-statutory in terms of fees, so we are able to set them locally to whatever we feel is appropriate, as long as it's reasonable and proportionate to the regime. And scrap metal dealers is very similar in that we are to set our own fees based on cost recovery, being reasonable and proportionate. The European Services Directive just gives us that test that we've got to be reasonable and proportionate when we're setting the costs for the processes, and we can't use fees to make a profit or use it to act as a deterrent in certain areas. So down to the proposal at section 3 of the report, I'll just go through the 3 separate areas. So the first part of the table is to do with sex establishments. As I say, we don't currently have any within the borough. We've not had one for 7 or 8 years at least. There's 4 separate fees there, and the proposal is to increase them by 4% across the board. In relation to scrap metal dealers, we issue two types of license, one for a site and one for people who go and collect. And again, we're proposing an increase of 4% on those. In relation to gambling, as already mentioned, the majority of these are set by statute. We can't amend most of them. The ones where we do have that discretion in relation to premises licenses, so for adult gaming centres, family entertainment centres, betting premises. For example, there's a range and a highest amount we can charge. We're already at the maximum for those, so we're not proposing to change any of those. The only one where you'll see an alteration is on page 12 of your report, relates to casinos. Again, we've looked to propose a 4% increase on those. We don't have any casinos. We currently can't have any casinos because the council has issued a no casino resolution back in 2008, I believe. So that would need to be removed for us to even entertain a casino application, should we have one. And we'd only be able to have what's called a small casino, and there are 3 different sizes of those within the Act. Section 4 just outlines the areas that we're allowed to cover the costs of in terms of our cost recovery of fees, and this is taken from the Local Government Association fee setting guidance. So really the proposal is for members to agree those fees. The only other option is to not cover all of the fees in that cost recovery, in which case the taxpayer would sort of be held liable to pay the shortfall from whatever we don't recover. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Do any members have any questions or comments on this item? Okay, Councillor John Williams.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question. How many scrap metal dealers' licenses is there in the borough? And I couldn't quite hear what you were saying, Matt. I ought to have said something. Can you bring the mic farther closer, please? Have you covered on the bingo and the track betting? That hasn't moved, and yet it's quite a big business in this area. Why haven't them charges been increased? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that better? Okay, lovely. So in relation to the second point as to why sort of bingo and track betting haven't increased, they're already at the maximum fees that we are allowed to charge. That's at the highest rate that the Act and the regulations allow us to charge. So we're unable to make any amendments to those anyway. So could you just repeat the first point, please? Scrap metal dealers, thank you. I believe we have 17 currently. Yes, when the Act came in 2013, we had approximately 35, 36. But things settled down over the sort of the first and second set of renewals, and they renew every 3 years, when people realised that they perhaps didn't need quite as many licenses as they had. So for collectors, for the people who go out and collect in the neighbourhoods, they have to have one in every single authority that they collect in. So they have to have one in Newcastle and Stoke and Cheshire East and so on and so on. And many of those people decided to sort of curb some of the areas that they went to, so they didn't need quite so many licenses. And then a number of sites within the borough have closed as well, because they used to have sort of multiple bases across multiple authorities, and they've chosen to go to other authorities to have their main site because they only have one site license. So our number has been relatively stable over the past sort of 3 to 5 years, at around 17, 18.
Cock.
Thank you. I just wondered if you can give us any more background on why figure of 4% was chosen, and does that cover any increased costs of administering these premises? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The 4% relates to the council's sort of financial plan going forward. 4% was the minimum to look at recovering costs on an ongoing basis for this year, as opposed to for next year, sorry, as opposed to this year. So we chose to just base the figures on that amount.
Further questions? No, none from members. I will ask a question if I may. We don't actually have any bingo or track vetting facilities within the borough, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure that there isn't.
No, neither.
Simplify that. Okay, so having said that, are members happy to agree these fees that have been put out? Yep, that's carried. No problem with that. Okay, so there are no more further licensing matters on the agenda, and so we will now move to the Public Protection Committee. So item 5 is declarations of interest in relation to public protection matters. Are there any declarations of interest? No raise of hands, so we'll move to item 6, which is the private hire and Hackney carriage fees and charges 2023 to 2024. The contents of this report can be found on pages 15 to 22. Again, I will now hand back to Matt, who will present his report to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is in some ways similar to what you've just heard, in some ways slightly different. In relation to, I'm going to call them taxi fees, just for ease. The council have the duty to set fees. They are non-statutory, so we again have full cost recovery powers in terms of setting our fees, and that is how we have set them. You'll know there are 3 sort of distinct areas of taxi licensing: drivers, vehicles, and operators. And we have set in the past, and we are proposing to set again quite a vast array of fees to deal with both sort of the primary applications for new and renewal applicants, but also for matters that happen midway through licenses. So a vehicle transferring to another person, or someone changing their address, and so on. And as I say, it's based on the full sort of cost recovery process and powers that we have. The recommendation, or 3 sort of separate recommendations to the committee. Firstly, is that members consider the proposed fees that are in the report, and I'll go through some of them in a moment. And if that's the case, that the proposed fees can be sent out for consultation, and I'll explain why we have to do that in a moment. And then following that consultation, a further report comes back. And again, that's the process that we've gone through, certainly all the time I've been here, and is the process that we have to go through if we look to change any of the fees that we have. So again, council have delegated this power to the Public Protection Committee. So it is in your power, as it were. The Act that deals with the fees splits them into operator and vehicle as one section, and the other section is drivers. For operators and vehicles, if we propose to increase the fees, there's a statutory obligation that we consult, and that is by way of a notice in a newspaper, giving a 28-day period for any comments. So that's the reference to consultation. We don't have to consult on drivers' fees. There's no obligation on us doing that. But when we do consult on the other 2, we typically consult on drivers as well. So the trade, members of public, and anyone else that has any interest has the ability to make comments on all of them. And that's dealt with at sections 1.3 and 1.4 of the report, explaining the statutory duties upon us and where the powers come from. There's an explanation at 1.5 as to why certain licenses last as long as they do. Driver licenses last typically for 3 years, operators for 5 years, and that's because the Deregulation Act in 2015 made that quite clear, where previously it wasn't. At 1.6, there's an extract from the European Services Directive. Again, it relates to charging of fees. They're not to be dissuasive. They're not to try and put people off, but they can be there to be reasonable, proportionate, and cover our costs. And 1.7, which is sort of the most recent law in relation to licensing fees, is the case commonly known as the Wakefield case, where it was confirmed that the authority could charge driver enforcement costs as part of their costs, whereas before it wasn't quite clear, either in the statute or anything that's gone before, that whether or not that could be the case. So again, with that, we've factored in our enforcement costs into the fees that we've set. So moving on to what we're proposing to you today, there's a table at 2.2 of your report. It details the type of application or the type of matter that the fee is for. Column B has what our current charge is as of today. Column C is the one you're probably interested in, which is the what we're proposing. And column D is a percentage change, because members have asked for that in the past to see what they are. Now, there are some larger percentages in there. If you look at those, they do generally reflect a small real term amount of £1, £2, £3. But because of the increase, it looks like a large percentage. Most of the fees have gone up predominantly because of the local government pay agreement that's been put in place currently. So it's based on the new salaries, whereas last year's was based on last year's salaries. And there are a couple of instances actually where the fees have gone down. So at 2.4, I've outlined what I've just said about the increases, but also that for new and renewal drivers, the actual overall cost is less. The application for the license itself, those who need a knowledge test, that fee has gone down. Safeguarding and disability and equality training, as I mentioned at the last committee, we've now successfully amalgamated that to start in January, so that's going to bring a cost saving to the drivers because the courses will be run together rather than there being two separate ones. It will also save them time because they'll only be going to one course rather than two in two separate locations or times. So overall, for drivers, there's a 25%, sorry, not 25%, £25 reduction if they're a new driver, and a £21 reduction if it's someone who's renewing their license from currently having one. Again, if there are any questions, happy to take them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Matt. Do members have any questions? Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I support this wholeheartedly. I think the most important section is 2.4. Like Matt says, a lot of the big percentages, very small amounts of money, whereas 2.4 points out the stuff that people will use. A lot of stuff, you know, if you change your dress, if you do this, if you do that, if you do the other, well, you might not do any of those. So it doesn't make any odds. Whereas 2.4 encapsulates what our taxi drivers, our existing taxi drivers, our new taxi drivers are going to have to pay, and it's actually less. So I think it's a very, very, very sound set of proposals. Thank you, Chairman.
The members wish to speak? Councillor Adcock.
Thank you. Yeah, I also think it's a good proposal. I think as we discussed before, the amalgamating of training to take place together, saving time and cost, is very sensible, and to pass that saving on, I think, is a really good proposal. So I support it. Thank you.
Happy to move the recommendations. Are members, are they happy to consider the proposed fees? Yes, I think that's all gone through on the nod. Okay, so what will be for that then, and then it will be taken out and we will go on from there forth. Okay, so thank you for that. We come to item 7, which is the Clean Air Act 1993 as amended, the review of smoke control areas and enforcement powers. This report is found on pages 23 to 28. I'd now like to invite Darren to present this report to you all.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee. The urban parts of the borough east of the M6 are where we currently have a number of smoke control areas, and these are designed to control emissions from chimneys in the main, and designed to impose conditions relating to smokeless fuels or approved appliances. Since since these smoke control orders have come into force, obviously understanding about impacts on health have developed, and it's now time, we feel, to modernise our approach to smoke control across the borough, and to review, in light of recent legislative changes and powers available to the council, whether it's now appropriate to consolidate smoke control areas, and also to what extent, whether that be covering the existing areas or to reflect the wider borough. There's also issues regarding enforcement of the current smoke control areas, with those being in the main from the 1960s, 70s. We don't have the records, so it does hamper us when it comes to enforcing smoke control provisions. And obviously, we've also got to have regard to the topical issue of fuel poverty as well. So we are mindful that this is a topical issue, together with health and impacts on health from air quality. And so we're basically advising committee that we'd like to review these and then bring a report back to committee in March 2023, not 2003, with recommendations for future smoke control regulation in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Any members have any questions, comments on this item? Okay, we'll start with Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things really. Darren, what is PM 2.5?
Thank you for asking that. Right, PM 2.5. If you imagine a grain of sand, it's 40 times smaller than a grain of sand. And basically, this very small particle, you breathe it in, it passes into your bloodstream and finds its way around your body, and can contribute to a whole host of diseases as outlined in the report. It's one of the major contributors towards poor health in this country, and the report details the potential health impacts and costs of the economy in the order of billions. So it's quite an important issue to consider locally. Locally, in relation to PM 2.5, we've identified, based on 2019 data, that PM 2.5 contributes towards around about 60 deaths per year in adults over the age of 30 within the borough. So it is an important issue for us to consider. And it's obviously something that's receiving greater government attention.
The second thing, Darren, is this is just for my information. It's not relevant to this particularly. What is the actual rule on having a bonfire in your garden?
Bonfires aren't covered by smoke control legislation. It's primarily statutory nuisance legislation and also householder duty of care. So this legislation, Clean Air Act, is designed to deal with emissions from chimneys. So from heating your home, your living room, your kitchen, those sort of things, and also industrial emissions as well from chimneys. So yeah, so if there is a problem with bonfires, we can deal with that using separate legislation.
I mean, I'm of an age when an autumn day you'd have bonfires of leaves being in everybody's garden, smoke going up and everything. You don't see that anymore. But as long as you don't do it on a regular basis, you could still do it and be within the law. It's making a habit of it, is it? It's dodgy.
Yes, you can do it legally, but we discourage that. We advise residents to use the council's green waste service, encourage home composting, and also give advice if people feel that they must burn to minimise smoke emissions. So dry fuels on a calm day that isn't going to smoke out the neighbourhood, and also alternatives to disposal, such as the county council's household waste sites.
Yeah, plus neighbours can tend to be a bit irate on that as well, Councillor Sweeney. Councillor John Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Could I ask the officer what's the approach for excuse me, enforcement, especially on residential properties that are emitting quite a lot of smoke or whatever, you know, thinking these particular times where the cost of fuel and whatever is horrendous. So what's your approach like on enforcement? Would you go approach people that are emitting extra?
Currently, we're reliant on the existing smoke control orders, which establish the smoke control areas. And as I've alluded to earlier, that a number of those are historical in nature. And as we've moved around various buildings and as time's progressed, we've lost a number of those orders. So we can't effectively enforce in some areas of the borough because we are reliant on the original order. Where we do receive complaints, however, we will advise householders of the legal responsibilities, that there are smokeless fuels available, and that they can use an approved, DEFRA approved appliance to burn an appropriate type of fuel. So we also go to in some cases, we will also go out and measure the moisture content of the fuel, particularly if it's wood fuel, because when people have chopped that down, they've not necessarily dried it appropriately, and that can lead to a lot of smoke. So initially it's advice, would be followed by enforcement if we were able to do that in the case of persistent burners. But with the new powers that have been outlined, we can update that approach and in extreme cases issue a fixed penalty notice. So it does offer an incentive for people to be more mindful about the health effects and the impact on the community. But obviously, yes, we are aware about the issues of fuel poverty, and that is something that we'll look to address in the report when we bring it back to you.
Councillor Turnwheeler.
And I've remembered to turn my mic on. Just a couple of points, really. As far as nuisance is concerned, can you correct me if I'm wrong? I think for a nuisance to be upheld, it has to be more than a one-off incident, and therefore Councillor Sweeney could happily burn his bonfire once a year. The second thing is this tends to be an enforcement that acts from initial complaints rather than something that is policed by a particular authoritative officer throughout the borough.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so in terms of bonfires, you are correct. In the main, a single event would not tend to be considered a statutory nuisance. However, if a whole neighbourhood had a bonfire each, then collectively that becomes an issue for the community at large. So we could take action. Except on bonfire night. Bonfire night is recognised as an event, but what we are seeing is that there's more and more organised bonfires and less complaints about smaller back garden or community bonfires on a piece of open land. So that's a positive. And then your second question, Councillor?
The second point was this is only something that can be reactive to a complaint. And therefore, the enforceability is quite difficult because there isn't a particular officer who goes around looking at chimneys. It has to be initiated by a complaint rather than something that is policed by an officer. Is that right?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. So in the main, we are complaint-led for the whole host of functions that we operate in environmental health and in my team dealing with pollution. But this time of year, officers will be out and about looking in as chimneys as we drive around or in the community, and we'll call on people or write to people as appropriate to offer the advice.
I think because of the changes in circumstances as far as fuel is concerned, certainly the places that I've been to is trying to purchase a wood burner. I mean, the waiting list is long. And you know, it's very difficult to order anything. So I think a lot more people are turning towards those sorts of fuels like wood burner or the like. So it might be more prevalent with the difficulties with fuels.
Okay, so where we've got an existing smoke control area, you are required either to burn a smokeless fuel So that's clearly marked up on the bag of fuel. Or wood that's got a low moisture content, which is badged as ready to burn. Or alternatively, to use a DEFRA approved appliance. That's a list that's available, that's been derived from the government. So if you are in a smoke control area, make sure it is a DEFRA approved appliance, or you are burning a smokeless fuel.
Thank you. Your knowledge is very thorough. Thank you.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you. Mine might seem silly question, but I get asked a lot by residents in Chesterton because we have a brick company, Ibstock Brick, and I want to know what colour smoke should be coming out of the chimney. I'm sorry to ask what to me seemed, but I get a lot of residents asking, why is that chimney smoking? I've been in that factory, so I've seen the process of how the bricks are made and everything, but I'd like to be able to answer the residents when they ask me the question, because I don't know.
Okay, well, thank you, Councillor. First of all, the emissions from Ibstock aren't covered through the legislation that we're discussing, the Clean Air Act. We do regulate, however, regulate Ibstock through an environmental permit, which places emission limits on emissions from the chimney, and those emissions are monitored and reported to the council. So I can provide you with a copy of the site permit, which details what they're allowed to emit from the chimney. But in most cases, what people will be seeing is steam from the drying of the clay as they passes into the ovens. Okay.
For that, hopefully I can give them a knowledgeable answer. Now you've answered the question. Thank you.
Just wish to speak on this. Councillor Brocky.
Just looking at when you said it was a reactive system, and you react to a complaint and then go and investigate, but also there are people going round or officers going round to have a look at chimneys. Can you see them in the dark? Because I mean, householders will tend to light the fire late on at this time of the year. And, there is smoke of varying degrees of compliance. And I'm also concerned that because it's a reactive system, if you live in an area where people are very environmentally conscious and they see some smoke belching out of some person's chimney in a big 4-bedroomed house and they get very upset, they won't mind grassing people up about nasty smoke. On the other hand, in some areas where there might be a lot of nasty smoke, and I mean of the legal variety, you may not get people reporting it, and yet it may cause even more social and pollution problems. I'm just wondering how even-handed it can be if it's a reactive system, because what we're trying to do is to stop people burning horrible things and making everybody drop down dead or whatever, and all this business about the diseases it contributes to. And I'm not trivializing it all. It is clearly serious, but is there any way, other than making sure you go around in the daytime when people might not have fires burning, and relying on neighbours and the level of, the level of complaint that you get, that you can, if you like, promote something that's perhaps not promoted about local issues, because you can promote the level of pollution likely to be caused by putting stuff on packaging, as you said, but people will go for the cheapest option that they can get hold of at the moment in this climate, and that will tend to be in areas where there is less policing, less reportage and all the rest of it. How, if you like, can we improve things apart from in this rather piecemeal sort of way that's focused on a lot of data and not really sufficient staff to carry out appropriate action? And can you see it in the dark? That wasn't a trivial question.
Okay, well, thank you for your question, Councillor. Depends if the moon's out, possibly, but yeah, it is very difficult to detect smoke in the dark, and obviously we'll tend to smell it and try and track it down. But there is generally an allowance for lighting a fire, getting it up to temperature, and then after that, there really shouldn't be any visible smoke coming out. But with regard to obviously the rural parts of the borough versus the urban parts of the borough, currently smoke control powers relate to the urban parts of the borough. And obviously what we've seen over time is the rural parts coming in for a lot of developments, particularly Baldwinsgate and Loggerheads, those areas. And those areas currently aren't covered by smoke control legislation or powers. So we can't really do anything there other than rely on statutory nuisance powers. And that can be a long drawn out investigation to establish a nuisance. So what we would envisage as part of the report coming back to you would be obviously a discussion of the powers and how we go about raising general awareness about smoke control, especially in light of fuel poverty, directing people to other sources of benefits and insulation grants, that sort of thing, and home energy efficiency, and a whole host of other options to really reduce people's need to burn. But obviously, if they do need to burn, we do recognise that there will be occasions when people have got no alternative, and potentially with what we're looking to introduce, we can take that into account. Okay.
Thank you. Further to Councillor Brocky's question, is there any onus that's placed on fuel merchants within smokeless areas that they're not allowed to sell smokeless fuel in there, like coal and dirty fuels in them zones?
Yeah, so currently it's an offence to supply non-smokeless fuel for use in a smoke control area. So the coal merchant that goes around and delivering fuel off the back of his wagon, he should be fully aware of the rules and requirements certainly for the urban parts of the borough that are covered by smoke control areas, and should only be supplying smokeless fuels. When they move across into the areas that aren't covered by smoke control areas, then they can supply basically what they want currently. And that's what we're looking to see if we need to address that issue and bring everything under a single smoke control order. But obviously we'll present options to committee and outline the benefits of the pros and cons of the options that we're proposing. But in any case, what we will try and do is raise awareness through various channels, social media being one, community campaigns. If we've got community champions, we do know that there are people out there that are generally interested in smoke control and air pollution. But in regards to offences for selling smoke generating fuels in the smoke control area, yes, that is something we can enforce. But generally we find there's a good degree of compliance with the retailers in this area.
Thank you.
Any other members wish to speak? No. Okay. Do members approve the recommendations set out in this report? Yes, I think everybody's totally agreed on that. Okay, thank you. Item 8 is the Environment Act of 1995, which is Part 4, Local Air Quality Management, Annual Status Report 2022. This report can be found on pages 29 to 34 of your pack. I hand back to Darren, who will present his report to you.
This is a report for those members that have long sat on this committee. You'll be familiar with this report coming to committee every year. This is a report that we are required to produce by law, and it assesses the current state of air quality in the borough with regards to nitrogen dioxide. previous reports have discounted a range of pollutants which we are required to consider as have not been an issue. So the current main issue is nitrogen dioxide. We also touch on this report in terms of particulate matter, which we've already discussed with regard to the Clean Air Act proposal. So currently we have 4 air quality management areas within the borough, where we assess levels of nitrogen dioxide at basically at the facade of the property of concern. So, for example, along Etruria Road, where we've got the terrace properties, the legal objective would apply at the facade of the property, not at the pavement. Okay, so we're looking at where people live or the school where children go to. So that's a subtle difference to the issue that the council is currently considering for the Etruria Road with Stoke-on-Trent City Council, where that is at the pavement level. Okay, so we've considered the air quality across the borough. We've taken account of air quality in the 4 air quality management areas. We've also looked outside those areas as well, and at potential hotspot locations. The report considers, bear with me, just trying to move my cursor down. So the report is in a very much a template, follows very much a template approach that's prescribed by DEFRA, and it considers the pollution over the last 12 months. So what we're looking at is we deploy diffusion tubes every month. We get the monthly results, and then we average those results across the year. So it's the annual mean objective that we're concerned with. So we've not identified any areas where we exceed the annual mean objective for nitrogen dioxide. However, we have identified areas where we are at risk of exceeding the nitrogen dioxide annual mean in future years. It'll come as no surprise, really. Those are in areas of the town centre, Kidsgrove town centre, where the traffic lights and the avenue gets heavily congested. The Newcastle town centre, where we've the A34 and also on Etruria Road, and also at Port Hill, Woolstanton Maybank. Now, Port Hill, Woolstanton Maybank is an area where we are compliant, but we want to maintain an air quality management area there and also monitor, continue to monitor the pollution levels, given the opening of the Etruria Valley Link Road, and also the potential impacts associated with the work that's being done for Etruria Road, where we could be considering a buzz gate. And that's obviously something that the head of services bringing before committee on a regular cycle. So I'm pleased to say really that we've not exceeded any the nitrogen dioxide objective over the last 12 months and calendar year. And we're working towards our air quality action plan as well to bring about and maintain improvements, and also to reduce exposure to nitrogen dioxide. So that's all detailed in the annual report, and it does have a public facing section which breaks down the technicalities and makes it a lot easier to understand for the general public. Okay, so really what we're looking to do is for your endorsement to accept that report, and also then to bring back so we'll be submitting that report to DEFRA with your endorsement, and then to bring back any adverse findings or comments from DEFRA for your consideration should we need to. In previous years, we've had favourable responses, so we've got no reason to believe that this year will be any different, but we've got that in there. So there's a full accountability and ownership of air quality issues within the borough. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Any members have any questions on this item? Okay, Councillor Weedham.
Just to say, I think the report is very thorough and totally in line with the council plans for the priorities. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. A couple of things on this. I think the move to electric cars has made a hell of a difference to this. That's one thing. And secondly, people working from home has made a hell of a difference to this. Put those two things together, and I think that's the answer why this has come down. Because I know if you go down Bastille Bank or Portal Bank in the morning, the traffic's not what it was. I'm not saying it's good, but it's not what it was. And it's all down to working from home and electric cars. Thank you.
Is that something you would ask DEFRA for in that?
Yeah, what we did see through the COVID lockdown was a dramatic improvement in air quality, and that's something that was reflected nationally. But obviously, with the current state of the economy, what's not happening is that we're not renewing the national fleet, if you like. The people are keeping hold of the cars much longer. So whereas we should be showing a much improved situation, we are improving, but not as quickly as we'd anticipate, and that's reflected nationally. And also, obviously, we've got manufacturers who've installed devices on their cars to make them appear more attractive, but whether they've not been quite as successful in reducing tailpipe emissions, I'll leave it at that really before I get drawn into any legal wranglings. But that's something else that's been taken into account. Home working is obviously of benefit, but with electric vehicles, that isn't the be all and end all of the air quality issue. Yes, you don't get tailpipe emissions, but then you do get more brake wear and tyre wear because they tend to be heavy vehicles. So the issue that we've been discussing tonight about particulate matter, that will become more of an issue as we move towards electric vehicles. Yes, we can see that being a challenge.
Thank you, Darren. Councillor John Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Say a good report, a lot to take in. But in my opinion, we've got a long way to go on air quality. People are not buying new cars. Still, the trade-in, second-hand cars is going up and up and up, and people are hanging on to them cars. So I can't see that that's going to improve. So we really got to go a long way, and it'll be up to a lot more government or industry or whatever, car industry, to really get people to buy new cars in this economic climate. One point I like to point out on 31, 2.10. Could you explain, because the officer explained, the Sands Lane to Cherry Road, the relevant in the so-called Basford Gate or Cherry Gate, where does that lie within that particular paragraph? Could you explain that, please? 2.10 on 31, page 31.
Yep, thank you, Councillor. Right, so I've mentioned that for the purpose of this report, that we're interested in nitrogen dioxide at the facade of where people live, basically. Whereas the ministerial directive work, which has been going on for a few years now, is concerned with where people walk, so the pavement side. So obviously levels you'd expect to be higher there because they're closer to the emission source, the tailpipe. So we've mentioned that in passing, but for the purpose of this report, it isn't actually a legal requirement to report progress on the ministerial directive work. But that is something that will come before committee, I believe, early next year, with an update on that work that's been obviously undertaken with the County Council and also Stoke-on-Trent City Council, and the various proposals that are being looked at to bring about compliance in the shortest possible time. Okay.
Any other members wish to speak? No? Okay. Are members happy to happy and content with the recommendations set out in this report? Yeah, I think that's carried. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, moving on to item 9, which is Environmental Act of 1995, Part 4, consultation on revocation of Little Maidley, AQMA. This report can be found on pages 35 to 40 of your pack. Again, let Darren take the reins on this and present this report.
We're pleased to say, really, that air quality in the Little Maidley Air Quality Managed Area, which covers one single property, Collingwood, which sits almost on the hard shoulder of the M6 motorway, has been compliant for a number of years now. So we adopted a cautious approach when DEFRA said to us to withdraw the or revoke the air quality management area, because we weren't sure what National Highways were doing with the M6 motorway in that section. Obviously, either side of junction 15 and 16, we've got hard shoulder running, which would tend to move cars closer to this property. But I understand that this particular section between 15 and 16 poses some challenges to hard shoulder running, so that is not likely to be an option for some years yet. So given that we've been compliant, we've been encouraged, and there's probably an expectation that we revoke this air quality management area, and that really should be taken as a good news story, because really there wasn't a great deal we could do other than rely on National Highways to reduce the levels of nitrogen dioxide. So this is probably one where we could say that road traffic emissions and modernisation of vehicle pollution technology has had a major contribution in this section of the borough, particularly as you've got high speed cars. Engine abatement technology is much better at when the engines are warmer, and we feel that's contributed significantly towards the improvements in this area. So what we'll be doing is pulling together a report with the evidence base to justify the revocation, and then going out to formal consultation with obviously the householder, the owner of the property, parish council, borough councillors, Highways England or Highways Agency, I forget which one they are these days, and then obviously the county council, and then any other relevant interested parties, and then bring a report back to committee with consultee comments and an appropriate recommendation, hopefully with a view to recommending a revocation of this AQMA. And then that will allow us then to focus on the 3 remaining air quality management areas, and then also to develop an air quality strategy for the wider borough to secure ongoing reductions in pollution levels. And that's something that we'll need to introduce next year. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Any members have any questions or comments on this item? No. Okay, therefore, are members happy to approve these recommendations that are set out? Yes, I think that's carried once again. Okay, thank you for that. Item 10 is minutes of the Public Protection Subcommittee meetings. There have been no Public Protection Subcommittee meetings since the last full committee meeting of licensing and public protection, although the Public Protection Subcommittee from Wednesday the 13th of July, which wasn't published at the last meeting, has now been published. Can I ask members if they're content with those as read? Yes. Urgent, item 11 is urgent business. I have been made aware of one item of urgent business, which is to do with air quality training. Again, I'll pass back to Darren, who will elaborate some more on this.
Okay. Clearly tonight, you've taken an active interest in air quality issues, and that's to be welcomed. I think you're championing the cause for the community there. Obviously, with air quality being such a topical subject and moving up the political agenda, especially with the current bill that's going through Parliament that seeks to establish a human right to clean air. What I'd like to propose to committee is that committee receives some formal training on air quality and health, and what we do as a council to have an input into that, and how you as a committee can help to shape our role and how the council achieves its objectives for a healthy, sustainable borough through clean air. So if committee would like to take that offer up, I'd be very pleased to organise that for you, and hopefully that's something we can do via a Teams meeting. So save dragging you out and getting your cars out. Okay. Thank you.
A few smiles. I take it everybody is happy with that. Okay, item 12, disclosure of exempt information. There are no items of public protection closed matters this evening. So therefore, that concludes this evening's meeting. The next full committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, January the 17th, 2023. All that's left for me to do now is to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, have a Happy New Year, and more importantly, a safe journey home. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.